Jonathan in Arizona. Jonathan.
Hey, guys. How are you guys doing?
Hello.
Hey.
Good.
Good. You're talking to Eric and V.
Hi, Eric. Hi, V.
Hello.
Hey.
What did you want to talk about today?
So, real quick, I have you guys hooked up to the Bluetooth in my car. Can you guys hear me pretty well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I actually, kind of full disclosure, I called because I saw that V was hosting. Eric, I haven't talked to you and Jamie for a while, but I called because V and I had an email back and forth a couple weeks ago, and she had recommended to call because these are the types of conversations that you guys like to talk about. So
Sure.
Awesome.
I'm taking your suggestion.
Rock on. Well, glad you did, man. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, sure. So what her and I were discussing was like consistency with what we generally believe as historical. I don't know, V, if you remember this.
Yes, I do.
Oh, cool. So yeah, my first general question was, you know, do we have consistency with what we generally accept as historical? But specifically, I was referring to like existence of people. And as a Christian, we were going back and forth talking about Jesus. And basically where, like, my question, I guess, is it leads to what I think is kind of important for any conversation between people discussing beliefs is, are we being objective and sincere and wanting to know the truth? And because if we're not, there's really no point in anyone talking about anything, right? If they disagree.
Sure.
If they're not willing to be convinced or willing to accept where the evidence lies or where it leads to, there's really just no point in having a conversation at all.
Agreed.
Right.
Okay. So, V, you had said you had recommended for me to look up works by Bart Ehrman, and
Yes.
obviously through email I couldn't tell you right away. I've read, probably 8 or 9 of his books.
Awesome.
Yeah, one of them, and it might be lesser well known because I really don't hear anyone ever mention it. One of them is called Did Jesus Exist? The entire book was only on that one topic, did Jesus exist? And when I had responded to you about Bart Ehrman, I listed that book as one that I had read, and then quoted 3 times where he says, like, first of all, how historians evaluate evidence and how they come to conclusions on whether someone existed or not, and without literally quoting all 3 of them that I had responded to in the email.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just go to like the very final words of his book. And the very final words in his book are, Jesus did exist whether we like it or not. Do you remember that when I had responded with that?
I believe so. It has been a couple of weeks, but I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know you guys talk to a lot of people, so it's not always going to be fresh in your mind.
That's
But,
okay. Going over it makes sure that we're not talking over the heads of the people watching.
Yes, so that's helpful.
Yeah, exactly. But what confused me, and I didn't follow up with you after this response you gave, but what confused me was after I had written that, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically you said historians all begin with the presupposition that the historical claim is true, and then they work backwards from that to show it's false. And I have never heard of that from any historian or any historical source or anything like that. Did you write that correctly, or did you mean to say that they don't?
Let me expand on that. And I am not a historian myself. I have heard historians talk about this, so I may get this wrong. And if so, feel free to call me out in the comments and I'll retract it later. But from my understanding, when you look at science, the goal is to look at something, figure out how it works, come up with a theory, and then try and disprove that theory, right? And say, okay, so we have an idea of how the world works. Now let's see if we can poke holes in it so we can better understand it and update the theory, right?
I do understand what you're saying, but I think you're confusing the scientific method with the historian method.
No, that's exactly where I'm going with this. So with science, the goal is to disprove previous theories in order to come up with better ideas. That's not how the historical analysis technically works. Sometimes people can, but that's not the goal. The goal isn't to look at a historical document or a series and poke holes in it and try and disprove it necessarily. That could be someone's thesis. I know Bart Ehrman does a lot of that kind of work. But when you're looking at a series of documents about a historical person and you have 3 or 4, right? Even if they're not contemporary, even if they're not looking at what the person actually said themselves, they'll say, okay, well, we've got 3 or 4 sources on this. Let's go with the assumption that this person existed. Because for the most part, that's not going to impact how we live our lives today, right? So if we were to say, okay, hey, Socrates, did he exist? Did he not exist? Here are some sources. We're going to come to the conclusion that, yeah, sure, he existed. And then other people say, no, he didn't. He was made up. Plato made him up. Right? And so the goal isn't, the historians don't go poking holes like, did Socrates exist or did he not? Because that's not their job. And that's not going to impact us today. Who cares? Right? We have the writings. It's valuable, but like,
there are some things that do seriously impact us.
Right, exactly. Which is why the historical method by itself is not enough to convince somebody that, say, someone as important as Jesus existed.
See, I feel differently about this.
Yeah?
Yeah. The way I take it is I don't care if someone named Yeshua lived 2,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. I think that is entirely pointless because that's a name. Nobody cares about whether or not somebody named Yeshua lived. I don't think even anybody cares if a upset apocalyptic rabbi named Yeshua existed at the time. What we care about is whether the Son of God who did miracles, who walked on water, who multiplied fishes and bread, who sacrificed themselves willingly as a sacrifice for the sins and for the atonement of the sins of humanity. That's the part that people care about. So, I mean, that's the difference between, hey, Eric, did you have cereal for breakfast yesterday? Sure. Okay. Yeah, you can believe that. Who gives a crap? But if I put a gun to your head and said, you better get this right, are you going to have a little bit higher standard? I would think so.
Yeah, and you know what? Honestly, I agree with that. And I guess my next thought is, I'm a Christian, and you're an atheist, and if we're both sitting here having a conversation, and we're both saying, I am open to being wrong, mm-hmm. Give me the evidence, and I will change my beliefs, which I am, and I believe that you are.
Oh.
But if hypothetically, if Jesus existed, if he was the Son of God, if he was resurrected from the grave, I can never persuade you or show you enough evidence to believe that if you don't first believe he at least existed as a historical person, right?
No, I don't care.
That's confusing me. If you don't care, then you can't say that you are open to being wrong.
No. Here. I can expand on this a little bit. Prove to me that miracles are possible, and then I will care. But if you tell me that there were, fictional deities who did miracles, I don't. It's a story. I'm not doing heavy work into whether or not there are gods at the top of Mount Olympus. I don't believe it. I don't accept that because even though there are tons and tons of stories written by different people, we talk about the Iliad and we talk, about the adventures in the Odyssey and going to the underworld and going to Tartarus. All of those different things, right? That's fantastic. That's a story. If you were to actually show me the river Styx, then I'd be pretty fucking interested, right? But the magical claims made in the Bible is what makes this something that needs to be justified before I'm going to give it my time of day. Because right now, it has not met even that basic standard. We have not been able to show that intercessory prayer works. We have not been able to see someone with missing a leg. We have not seen prayer or miracles bring back a broken limb. What we do see is things that are much easier explained by things that we do know are in the real world, like misdiagnosis, like spontaneous remission, right? Those things happen. But miracles? Dude, you got to show that those happen first before we can pop that on the table.
I think, and
Okay, so I'm sorry, V, go ahead.
I see where you're coming from. Establish the historical part first, and then talk about the miracles after that. Because if you can start with this,
isn't that the only way to do it, like deductively? If I tell you my best friend Doug can perform actual magic and make a car levitate.
Okay.
Don't you have to first believe that Doug exists?
That doesn't matter, though, because you could show me Doug, and that still wouldn't prove anything. It's the same.
Exactly, but I can't move on to the miracle part until you first believe that the person who did the miracle at least existed.
Okay, so then how about for the sake of argument?
It seems like you're working backwards.
No.
That makes sense to me.
No, okay, so if this argument will be bettered by giving you that someone named Yeshua was born and lived 2,000 years ago, cool.
Right.
So what? What's next? Oh yeah, the miracle part, right? That's the actual part that has importance. So show it, please.
Okay, right. But I'm not, like, my purpose of the call today, at least, was not to prove Christianity. My curiosity was, is Eric sincerely interested in what the truth is, and is he objective and open to the evidence that can lead him there? And I have no reason to believe that you don't.
Yeah.
Because I've loved watching the shows. We've probably talked 6 times. I have no reason to believe that you're not. But my question is, it's not, do you have a problem with the idea of Jesus existing? It's, do you believe that Jesus existed? And if your answer is no, then I'm curious how you distinguish between, say, the existence of Jesus or the existence of Constantine, or because they're identified as historical figures through the exact same historical processes.
Okay.
So if you believe one existed and you don't believe another one existed, what's the distinguisher there?
Sure. So did Jesus have a journal?
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh, okay. So then, yeah, no, that's not an apples to apples comparison, is it? We have no contemporary writings. We have no actual first-person accounts of it. We don't have anything that Jesus wrote, right? We don't have anything that if we want to talk about the apostles, we can talk about the Apostle Paul, right? Oh, yeah, never met the guy, never met Jesus, did he? Even by his own admission, we don't have that. But we have second and third hand accounts that were written many, many years after the death, right? And then we have other accounts that say, no, I was totes there. And then even through Christian scrutiny, through Christian scholarship, it goes, oh, wait, never mind. No, this came in much later. This is fan fiction, but we're going to keep it in the Bible. So
is that what you're saying is a distinguisher between those two?
Yeah, dude.
Okay, so I guess the next question is, in my mind, the question I see is, what leads to believe that there are no contemporary accounts? Because you cited Paul, which is where I would have went.
Sure.
But
yeah, Paul encountered Jesus on the road to Damascus, right, as a vision
that no one else saw, rather heard, not saw.
Right. I do know that there are plenty of people who, through dehydration and exhaustion, experience hallucinations like that. Hey, that's an explanation that's much more likely. How did you rule that out, Jonathan?
Because what I do is, like, I'm trying to put myself in the time period as best as I can, which is, it's obviously difficult. But you ask that question of, Paul could have been dehydrated and had a hallucination because people dehydrate and have hallucinations.
Right. How many people have miracles? Who gets scales over their eyes?
Agree. Right. No, I understand that.
Right. How many people talk to donkeys? Well, the donkeys talk back.
I understand the point that you're making, but you're asking me a question. Why isn't him dehydrating easier to believe? Because people dehydrate and have hallucinations. And again, this goes back to me trying my best to put myself in that time, in that period of what's going on. And if Paul was the biggest persecutor of Christianity at the time and was seeking out Christians to kill them and put them in prison because he hated Jesus, he hated this idea of him being the Messiah, he rejected it completely, and then for him to have what he believed to be a vision of Jesus and dramatically change his ways. I mean, he didn't. I guess if you're saying that he was dehydrated, had a hallucination, I mean, are you using that like in the entire spectrum of he was brought to Damascus, he was blind for 3 days, a messenger came and said, you're going to be Jesus's right hand, and you're going to change the world of Christian. You're going to be the one to introduce Christianity and truth. He was still under that same hallucination. Like, even though a physical human being came in, messenger. I mean, I guess it's not for sure.
What I'm saying is that
dehydration, hallucination, like he was dehydrated for 3 days, even though he made it to town, was still blind.
Yeah, got it. What I'm saying is that it's an unreliable text, but I'm also realizing that this conversation is not on point with what we started with. All right, we kind of moved the goalposts of the conversation to whether or not the Bible is legitimate from the conversation, how do we know something is historical? But I think we answered that if you want to say something is historical, when the stakes are low, then it doesn't matter as much. But when there's a gun to your head, it matters a whole lot more. And that if you're looking for likely examples, if you were to hold a gun to my head and say, Eric, this person's cancer is gone. Why? Click, here's the gun, what's your decision? I'm never going to say miracle because there's never been a time when that has actually been the explanation.
So, I'm not sure, where is this coming from? Because I'm certainly not here holding a gun to your head to say, but you need to make a decision.
Yeah, but we're making judgments on whether or not something is true, right?
And it's a very big deal if we get it wrong, apparently, because there's everlasting torment waiting if we get it wrong. So the point is, we need a bigger standard of evidence for something that's going to affect our quote-unquote eternal souls, as opposed to one that's just like, yeah, sure, he existed. What about it?
It's way, yeah. I mean, dude, click, decide.
I mean, that was one of the points I was making. If you at first do not accept the evidence that he even existed, and I'm using the reference that you gave me, V, and he is saying, whether we like it or not, Jesus did exist. Okay. And then I come back to you with the reference you gave me, and I said, the reference you gave me said Jesus existed. And your response is, well, I'm open to the idea. That's what I'm curious about. Why the reservation? Why are you open to the idea of his existence, but the source that you gave me says Jesus existed, and you're still saying, well, it's not a historian's job to disprove a claim. It's like, that seemed to me like, I don't understand what you're asking me then. I went to the source you gave me, gave you 3 quotes from his book. His final words are, Jesus did exist, whether we like it or not. And then you say, well, it's not his job to disprove it.
Okay. Well, the reason I gave you that book
I have to question myself. Are you sincerely interested in where the evidence goes?
Yes. Yes, I am. The reason I gave you the sources for Ehrman was because I thought he did a really good job laying out which parts of the Bible, which parts of the gospel might be true, and which parts might not be true. I wasn't giving it to you to dispute the fact that Jesus maybe existed or did not. My whole thing, though, is I'm an agnostic, okay? There are things about this world that I don't accept I will not know 100%. And that happens to be one of them. I could not tell you with 100% confidence that Jesus existed. I don't care, honestly, one way or the other. Sure, if it makes the conversation go quicker and we can get to your main point, I will grant you that for the space of this conversation. But it doesn't affect my life, and so I'm not putting a whole lot of thought behind it, honestly.
Okay. I mean, and honestly, that was really what I was most curious about.
Well, I'm glad that we were able to help. I know we have a few more calls, but it's always fun listening and talking to you because, good, hold our feet to the fire. If there's something you don't understand, make sure that it's brought up. We're not afraid to talk about it, and we're definitely not trying to uphold one viewpoint as having to be true.
Right.
That's what Christians do.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks for calling in. Thank you.
Take care, brother.
It's always fun to talk with you, Eric.
Bye.